Morning, it's June 6, 2000. We're here talking to General Alvin Ungerleider, member of the 29th Infantry Division, 115th Infantry Regiment. It's Eisenhower Center, New Orleans, and we're here for the opening National D-Day Museum. General, thank you for coming by, sir. Appreciate it greatly.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yes, sir. If you wouldn't mind, starting before the war, get a little background on your family life before the war.
Well, you want the background before the war?
Yes, sir, a little bit about your life.
Yeah. Well, I was born in New Jersey. I lived there in West New York, New Jersey until I was 8 years old. My father died. My mother moved back to Carbondale, Pennsylvania. I was in grade school, high school in Carbondale. When Pearl Harbor hit, I went down and tried to enlist in the Marines. And because I had one crooked toe, some sergeant said no. The medic said yes, but the sergeant said no. So then I waited, and I was drafted in November of 1942. I went through basic training at Camp Wheeler, Georgia. I went through the NCO Academy, the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy at Camp Wheeler, and then I was selected to go to the Officer Candidate School Infantry at Fort Benning, Georgia. I graduated from Fort Benning as a second lieutenant in July of 1943. I had various administrative assignments in the United States for the next few months to learn administration and not just how to fire a rifle or get other people to fire their rifles. Then in December of 1943, I was sent up to Fort Meade, Maryland, and there processed to go overseas. We moved down to Camp Kilmer and then Camp Shanks, New York. We boarded the Queen Elizabeth, had a very rapid sail. It was not a luxury liner at that time. It was configured for troop carrying. We landed in Scotland without incident. From Scotland, we went to a replacement depot, and then down near Plymouth was where the 115th Infantry Regiment was living at the time, and I was assigned to the 3rd Battalion of the 115th Infantry at a place called Fort Tregantle. And there I was assigned to L Company of the 115th. Give you a little background on the whole 3rd Battalion of the 115th. They were all from the eastern shore of Maryland. And when I joined L Company, I didn't understand a word they were saying. They all had this very quaint old English accent, different phrases for different things that I knew about. And I was given command of the 3rd Battalion of the 115th Infantry. We trained for, I joined them in January of 1944. We trained for the next 5 months as hard as any training I had had, even including Officer Candidate School, along the moors of England, and then occasionally we'd go out to sea and practice landings at a place called Slapton Sands. Some of you may be familiar with the history there, but the 4th Infantry Division went in not too much removed from D-Day, and a U-boat got in among them and killed 800 people from the 4th Infantry Division. We were lucky. On the 4th of June, no wait a minute, on the 31st of May, we moved into what they call a marshalling area down near Plymouth, England, just off the coast. And there, for the first time, we learned where we were going. We learned the name of the beach called Omaha. We saw the terrain. The one thing they omitted, they said nothing about hedgerows, and I'll get into that in a little while. We boarded ship on the 4th. I was on a landing craft infantry, which holds about 200 men. It had the whole of L Company on that ship, plus some other people from battalion headquarters. We thought we were going to go in on the 5th of June, but the weather was not right to go in that day, so Eisenhower called it off, and we were in on the 6th. While we were bobbing on the sea on the 5th, and it was rough, I read a book called The Song of Bernadette. I read the whole book that whole night, and I still remember doing that. On the 6th, when we woke up, we saw the largest armada of ships that I had ever seen in my life. And at 6:30 in the morning, they all started firing at the same time. All the battleships, all the destroyers, everything that had heavy weapons, rocket ships, whole works. And the reason we were on LCIs, which holds the whole company, and the ramps come down from the side, they don't come down from the front. The stairway goes down from the side. We were supposed to follow the 116th Infantry in. Now you've seen Private Ryan, and what you saw there is the best depiction of what happened on the beach to the 116th. They were really getting annihilated. And we were sitting watching all this, and we said, boy, oh boy, what are we getting into? And about 9:45 in the morning, the word came down. They had gone in at 6:30 in the morning. 9:45, we got word that we're not going straight in behind them. We're going to swing up the beach about 500 meters and go in there. And the LCIs, we were lucky. We had an LCI that was piloted by a merchant marine man that had been in the Pacific and made a lot of landing. He said, I'm going to get you in dry or I'm not taking you in. So he got us just up to the beach. We had 2 feet in the water up to our knees, and up we go. What saved our neck compared to the 116th, as we were heading toward the beach, 3 destroyers came up alongside of us, did a right turn about 300 meters off the beach, firing as they did, and that helped button up the pillboxes and the machine gun positions that were out in the open. Just long enough to where when we went in, we had very little firing from there. The first thing I noticed, though, when we got off the LCI was there was a minefield. And I looked, and you could see the thing sticking up from the ground. So I passed the word back to my men. I said, step or I step. And I'm very careful not to step on a mine. Well, always somebody doesn't get the word, and a couple of guys, and one guy in the back stepped on a mine, killed himself and the guy next to him. That was 2 men I lost. And then as we were going up, sniper firing coming from someplace hit 2 more of my men. But then we proceeded up, and we, other than the people that went up at Point de Hawk, were the first that got up on the beach on the high ground. This helped relieve some of the pressure on the 116th that was still having a heck of a time on near Veerville, and we went up close to where the U.S. cemetery is right now, and got to the high ground, and right to our right was a town called Saint Laurent-sur-Mer. The decision came down to dig in for the night, and we would attack this town the next day. In the meantime, the 116th was able to get up because the pressure had been relieved. Because we were first up, we got the first U.S. presidential citation of any unit citation of any unit. Eventually they all got one, but we were first on the orders. So the next morning we woke up and we mortared and shelled this town and then moved in and took it. And then we proceeded towards where the 116th had come up. They were still trying to get reorganized. We had some fighting along the way as we moved along the beach, and then again we stayed overnight. And then we came to a place called, it was called the Inundated Area. It was a marshland that had been flooded by the Germans. And we were given the mission of crossing this marshland and get to the next little town, which was called Colombier. As we started across, every once in a while somebody go down and we didn't know what happened. There were ditches along here. So we got word back to our engineers to bring some planking up and put it across these ditches, and we were able to then cross on the planking. We got up into the town of Colombier. There were some German staff cars in the area. We shot them up and we took the town. And this was on D+4. It was an overnight occasion. It was a tough crossing. We were tired when we got over there. Our 2nd battalion, remember I was in the 3rd battalion of the 115th, had gone on after we got to the high ground. They passed through us, and they came late in the day to a town called Lake Carrefour. Turned out that they were tired also, and they moved into this field thinking it was safe, and it was when they first got in there, but a German unit had come up behind them looking for the same field evidently, and there was a terrible battle there. They lost their battalion commander, they lost all kinds of people. The really bad feature of all that, the commanding general came down the next morning and called them all a bunch of cowards, which was not called for. They fought as hard as they could. Then we rested a couple of days, and then we hit what they call the bocage, the hedgerow country of Germany, of France, excuse me. Not normal hedgerows like you see in your backyard here, but hedgerows that have been built up over the years. Farmers cleared their field, they put the stones down, put some dirt over it, put more stones down. Eventually they built a wall, and because they were putting dirt in between them, hedges started growing up from the dirt. And these encircled the field. And the Germans had fortified every corner and every middle section of those fields. And we had a heck of a time trying to break through the hedgerows. That's where I was wounded for the first time on D+14, which was 2 weeks after D-Day. A mortar shell came in and hit me in the thigh and the arm. I was evacuated to England for 3 weeks. They left the shrapnel in there. I still can't take an MRI. And they sent me back, and fortunately I was able to get back to my unit. A lot of people, when they were hit and went to England and came back, they were sent through the replacement system, and they could have ended up any place. I had been in L Company, which was from Crisfield, Maryland, way down in the Eastern Shore, as I mentioned earlier. When I came back, they put me in I Company, because by this time I was a first lieutenant. I was the exec officer of I Company, another rifle company. And I stayed with I Company for the rest of the war. I was wounded a second time, a little later on, I'll tell you about that. But when I came back from the hospital from the first time, it was the day that St. Lo fell, and St. Lo was the main communication center for all of Lower Normandy. It had been leveled. I mean, our bombers really leveled that town. And we had to fight through all that, our division had to fight through all that rubble. We were assisted by the 35th Division, and they finally took the town of St. Lo. And I joined them just a day or so after it. The next smaller town, but still one of the main little cities there, was called Veer, V-I-R-E. The 116th was in the center now. They had been reconstituted. The 115th was on both of their flanks. And Veer turned out to be a very tough nut also, because there were a lot of mountains there and you had to fight through the mountains. I mean, we finally took Veer, and I was wounded again on the 30th of July, just a grazing wound along my rib cage. They put a bandage on it and I stayed with my unit. The day after we took Veer, the whole sky was dark with airplanes. They'd come over to pave the way for Patton. They dropped a whole bunch of bombs. Unfortunately, they killed a lot of American troops, including General McNair, who Fort McNair is named after in Washington. So they came back the next day and they did it right. And right after that, Patton went rolling through with his armored forces. We were put in a rest area. We thought maybe we'd come back home after all that hard fighting and train troops here in the United States. Well, as it turned out, they turned us around and we went down the Brittany Peninsula to the port of Brest, B-R-E-S-T, the main submarine port for the German U-boat fleet in the Atlantic. Our job was to take the port to be used for our purposes as a port. Other units were attacking Cherbourg at the same time. 3 divisions went down to Brest. Took 6 weeks of hard fighting, almost as hard as fighting through the hedgerows because of fortifications inland from the port. But we finally took that. There was a German paratroop division in that area, and finally he surrendered. He didn't want to, but he finally surrendered, and we took the port of Brest. Now we're at a port. We going home now? No. They turned us around after a couple of days rest, and we're back through Belgium, to Holland, to Germany. No fighting in Belgium. In fact, we were able to stop on the way up, and I saw this store that said ice on it, E-I-S. I'm going to check that out. It was an ice cream shop. And that was the first ice cream that we had since a long time back in England. And then we moved into Holland, and we liberated the southern part of Holland. The northern part of Holland was not liberated at all until the end of the war. And then we started getting into Germany towards the Siegfried Line. We went through a whole bunch of little towns toward the Roer River, R-O-E-R, different towns. We lost almost a whole company, K Company to 115th. They got captured. And we finally got down the river, and a main town there was Jülich, J-U-L-I-C-H, big sports arena in Jülich. And we were slated to cross the Ruhr. It wasn't much of a river. And just about the time we did, it was the 18th of December, and that's when the Battle of the Bulge started. The Germans came through the Ardennes. We were held in place. We had to kind of do a right turn and protect that flank against the Germans, which we did. They were not able to break through us. And until the Bulge was eliminated, well into the end of January, into February, we stayed in place. We were doing some fighting back and forth around Jülich, but that was all. When it was finished, we were all set. The engineers had come up with bridging and everything else to put across this little creek, and we started to move down. The Germans flooded the whole plain. They left the dams loose upriver and flooded that whole plain, and we were delayed again until early in March, or late February, early March, and then we crossed. The next major obstacle, of course, was the Rhine, but somebody found a bridge at Remagen, and a lot of American troops had already crossed the Rhine and branched out both ways. So when we crossed, it was not much of a thing. We did take the town of München-Gladbach, which was where Goebbels had his chateau there. I remember the Jewish personnel of the unit got together in the castle. There was a Nazi flag hanging in the background, and they held a Passover service there. And I thought, how quaint. But anyway, then we took the town of Aachen, which was a major city, and then we started to roll. After we crossed the Rhine, we got close to a German town called Hanover, Hanover. We're on the way to the Elbe by this time because it was in the March and April. And around the 15th of April, at this time I was commanding I Company. I get a call from battalion headquarters, take your company, and I'm giving you 2 tank destroyers, and go down south of Hanover to a town called Nordhausen, which we did. It was about 110 kilometers. We did some shooting as we went down, eliminating minor opposition because the war was drawing to a close. And as we approached Nordhausen, I noticed 2 small turrets coming out of the ground, little towers. And suddenly we started getting some machine gun firing from these 2 towers. So I brought up the 2 tank destroyers and I said, knock out those 2 little towers, go forward, take a left, and whatever's there, a gate or a crash through, and we'll be right behind you. They killed all the men in the towers. There were 4 in each one. When we came into the courtyard, the sight of people was absolutely sickening. What we had run into, there was 23 slave labor camps around Nordhausen, whose mission was to make the V-2 missiles which they were firing against England. They were doing this down in a deep ravine where they had built their factory. So the factory was secure. No way you could knock that out. And they were so emaciated they could hardly stand up, these people. And finally I told them, get back into the barracks until we clear the camp. And in clearing the camp, we picked up 44 SS prisoners. And my men were ready to kill them. I was ready to kill them. Finally, I said, look, there's a Geneva Convention. We're not supposed to kill prisoners. Just guard them and don't let them get out of here, which they did. Then I noticed a small building down in the middle of the quadrangle there, and I said to my radio operator, leave your radio here, but bring your M1 rifle and some ammunition. We'll just go down and see what's in that low-slung building there. I opened the door, and there were 10 ovens in there. It was their camp crematorium. This fellow's name was Billy Melander. He's still alive. He lives in Babylon, New York. And I said to him, Billy, you, as I open each door, you be ready to fire that rifle because I'm going to open the door and step back. So I did this with the first 4 ovens, and all that was in it was ashes. There was no people in there. Then I got kind of a funny feeling as I came to the 5th door. And I looked at him, and I opened the door, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 off went that M1 rifle as fast as he could fire it, 8 rounds, and this guy toppled out of the oven with a Luger in his hand. Billy still has the Luger. So then we were wondering who was in the other 5 ovens, but it turned out to be ashes again there. So I was a little bit shaken because I came as close there to being killed by that Luger as I had been any time during the war, and I thank Billy for saving my life. And I went up to Babylon to tell him so. So we both were a little shook up, and we went back out, and then I went into one of the barracks, and that was a mistake. The sickening look of the people in there. They were covered with sores. They were moaning. They were groaning. And I said, and at that time I didn't know what they were manufacturing there. I said, so I went out, and some of them who could get up and walk followed me out. We gave them what food we had. They all came out. There must have been about 300 people, 300 men, all men out there. And I thought just occurred to me, I said, are any of you Jewish? And about 25 of them held their hand. The rest were Italian and Polish and whatever. And I said to them, would you like for me to say the Kaddish, which is the Hebrew prayer for the dead? And they said yes, and as I did, the tears were just streaming down my cheeks. And then we started feeding them more. Some of them couldn't handle the food, and they were toppling right over with the GI rations. Not the first ones that happened. But then I got on the tank destroyer radios back to my battalion headquarters, and I told them what had happened. I had been sent down there to find a bivouac area for the whole regiment. And I told him what we had run into, and he said, stay there until I send in a military government unit. They're the ones that are trained to handle sick people, to feed them, clothe them, bathe them, the whole works. And finally they showed up, and then he said, come back up north of Hanover. We're not going to bivouac there. We're on our way to the Elbe. So I did, and we joined them just north of Hanover. About 8 days later, about 12 days later, we're on the Elbe River. We could see the Russians coming up on the other side. We were not supposed to cross the Elbe. Some of our people did, got German pistols and traded their pistols for them. And we sat on the Elbe for 2 or 3 days just looking at the Russians. Then the word came down that they're moving the whole 29th Division to Bremen and Bremerhaven, about 200 kilometers from where we were. And there we went into what they call the Army of Occupation. The 29th's mission was to open the port of Bremen was to be the main port for supplying the Army of Occupation that was staying there. And to find any Nazis that we could find and bring them in. And we were busy doing that for some months after the war. During that time, I signed up to stay with the 29th Division. I thought they were going to stay as occupying troops for a while. December, this 29th started packing to go home. And I started packing too, and somebody came down and said, the battalion commander wants to see you. And I said, what for? I said, I don't know. So I went up, and he says, you're not going home with us. And I said, I thought I signed up to stay with the 29th Division. He said, no, you signed up to stay in Germany. So then I got a really weird assignment. I was assigned to a Graves registration unit in Kaiserslautern, Germany, with a mission of being trained of how to disinter bodies and move back out of Eisenhower throughout Germany and remove any American dead that were buried in Germany. The high command, or even back here, the decision made they didn't want any U.S. soldier or airman buried in Germany. I had some morticians with me, and people knew how to handle caskets and things. I had a platoon of infantry with me just in case. And we started doing our job. And every town we went into, the Germans knew exactly where the bodies were, took us right to the grave. We disinterred them. We packed them back up for shipment to wherever. We notified their family that the body had been located. Do you want them home? Do you want them buried in France, Belgium, Holland, Italy, England, wherever? Most of them opted for them to go home, be sent home. The only unusual case we had, we opened up this one casket, and there were two bodies in there, one man, one woman. And the best we could figure out is some pilot said to his girlfriend, hey, you want to go for a ride? And then we had the job of figuring out how to notify this English girl's family. So we just sent them a message that we had found a body, and we didn't say any more about it, that it was in with somebody else. I bet she's still wondering how her daughter got there too. And then the only other thing that was a little bit dangerous, or maybe a lot dangerous, there's an island called Borkum, which is in the North Sea, big playground area for the Germans. And they, what had happened on the island of Borkum, a U.S. plane had crash landed there. The crew got out of the plane, they were alive, and as they were marching them into town, they stoned them to death. Not one of the crew of 9 lived. Found out later this was considered a war crime, but I'll tell you, the tension you could cut with a knife, and I had those riflemen with their rifles ready at the time. But we finally got the bodies, we got them on the ferry and moved on out. But I'll tell you, the whole time I was there, I was a little bit apprehensive of them starting throwing rocks at us. But evidently I learned a lesson. There was some major that was in charge of the garrison. He was later hung, and I think most of his staff was later hung. So that was the last. After that, I received orders to come home. This was in 1946. I was assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and on one of the trips I made home around Christmas, New Year's vacation time, and coming into 47, that's where I met my beautiful bride. She had come from Syracuse to Carbondale, and we met and corresponded for a while, and then I proposed, and she accepted, and that started a beautiful family that we have now. But while I was at Fort Campbell, I was in the G3 section training. It was the 101st Airborne Training Division. And I saw this letter came across my desk, and I said, gee, this is interesting. They're having a course in what they call Troop Information and Education up at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. And I said, gee, I don't care what the course is. I want to go up to be in Pennsylvania. That's my home state. So I did, and I didn't notice the small print on the bottom, upon completion of the course, assignment back to Germany. And I at least got assigned to the job I was trained for at Carlisle as a Troop Information and Education Officer in Frankfurt, Germany. In the meantime, I'm waiting for an opportunity to bring her over so we could get married. And finally, in late December of 47, I was able to get all the paperwork cleared, and she came over in January, and we were married the 23rd and the 25th. You have to get married twice in Germany, once by the Burgermeister and once in a religious ceremony. And that started, we stayed in Germany for the next couple of years. We had one son born in Frankfurt, our oldest son, and he's in the TV business now up in Boston. And then we went home in 1950, and this time I was assigned to Fort Dix for just a little while, and I thought, gee, this is great, right around family. And instead, we were sent to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, and there we were training troops for quite a while. And then Korea hit just about the time we got down there. And in 52, I was alerted to go to Korea. And the fellow who I had replaced at Breckenridge, he had gone to Korea, and the job he held at Headquarters 10th Corps, which is out in the center of Korea, Kwandarie Valley they call it, he saw that I got his job, which was Secretary of the General Staff to the Commanding General of 10th Corps. So we're getting past World War II now, and I don't know whether you want to keep going. I notice he wants to get more of my life in here.
I say keep going.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? When you were in Nordhausen, what made you think to ask if these were Jewish inmates, and how did you communicate with them?
Well, firstly, I'm Jewish, and I just asked a question. I didn't know whether any of them were Jewish or not. But when 25 of them held up their hand, I figured there must have been a lot more of them there, because each of those 23 camps had been staffed with 1,000 individuals. And to come in and only 300 are left, and half of them were dying then. I don't know, it just came to me, and I asked a question, and was surprised by the answer. I didn't think there'd be anybody there.
What language did you communicate?
A little bit of Yiddish, a little bit of German, a little bit of English, a little bit of French, and gradually they were able to communicate a little bit. But then after we were finished with the Kaddish, I said, anything you want to ask me? He said, I got an uncle in Philadelphia, do you know? That kind of stuff. I said, well, I'll take his name and call him and tell him I saw you whenever I get back. That's how it came about. It was just a whim right on the spur of the moment. The idea came to me, and I thought I'd ask.
So did you have to find any sort of special accommodation through training in Britain, the United States, being Jewish, as far as food or religious services, or?
No. The question was it difficult being Jewish in the Army? The answer for me, after I got through basic training, it was not difficult. I was openly Jewish wherever I went. I participated in Jewish services whenever I could. In England, I did attend a Seder in London. I was able to get a 3-day pass and go up there before we hit the beach. In France, I told you we had a Seder in Mönchengladbach. Up until that point, the chaplains used to come around once in a while, and we'd hold a service wherever we could. And then after that, I became actively Jewish. I was a lay leader almost most of the places we went. Okay, well, any other questions back to World War II?
That was the only question I wanted to ask.
All right, we're in Korea. I was not in as much danger in Korea as I had been in Europe, but I did, with all the helicopter flying and stuff I do with the general. Occasionally we got shot at, but that was the extent of it. And then our job also out there at 10th Corps was to train the Koreans to take over that whole sector. And when we finished that, the 3rd Rock Corps took over from the 10th U.S. Corps. And General Bruce Clark was going down to be the Deputy 8th Army Commander. Bruce Clark was very famous in World War II. It was his troops that relieved Bastogne in the 4th Armored Division. He and Creighton Abrams, who later became Chief of Staff of the Army, they both worked together. And I moved down to Seoul, Korea with General Clark, and I was there for 20 months total in Korea. And General Clark came in one day and said, I'm going home for a 30-day leave. You want to come with me? And I said, then come back again? He said, yeah. I said, well, I think I've been away from my family long enough, General. I think it's time for me to go home. We had 2 children by this time. So he flew me home. He left me off at Fort Dix, and I was able to get home from there. And he went on to Texas, and he came down with hepatitis real bad in Texas. And he never went back to Korea. He ended up to be the Army Commanding General of the Pacific. And I figured, geez, if I had known this was going to happen, I certainly would have stayed with him and ended up in Hawaii. But it didn't happen that way. I went out to Fort Ord, California, and interesting things happened. You asked about Jewish. When we got to Fort Ord, I was the Army Reserve Advisor for all of Monterey County, California, big area. And the post chaplain at that time was a chaplain, Henry Tavel, and he was Jewish, and he ran all the chaplains. And our children were Sunday school age at the time, and I went up to see the chaplain, and I told him, that as far as I know, the people in town send their children to Sunday school over to Salinas, which is over the mountain, about 16 miles, and it's not an easy drive. I said, can't we set up a Jewish Sunday school here at Fort Ord? He said, good idea, go ahead. I thought he would do it, he being the post chaplain. So right across the bay was the Presidio Monterey, which was at that time the Army Language School. And I went over there and I talked to the commandant. I said, you don't use your buildings on Sunday for classes, do you? He said, no. I said, do you mind if we set up a Jewish Sunday school here? And he said, no, go ahead. I said, we'll clean the blackboards when we empty out the waste baskets, and we'll keep it neat and clean when we leave. So I got all the people from town together, all the people from on the post at Fort Ord that had children to go to Sunday school. I told them we're setting this up. Were they interested? Of course they were interested. They wouldn't have to drive well over to Salinas. And I said, but we're going to charge. I said, the reason we're going to charge is I'm going to pay the teachers. I'm not going to get paid, but I want the teachers to come to school every Sunday and teach. And I think by paying them, they'll be more highly motivated. So we started it, and it ran beautifully. It went great. In fact, that was a seed for the first Jewish synagogue in Monterey. After that, they figured, we ain't going to Salinas, we'll build our own temple, and they did. And I was highly honored by the chaplains. I got the lay leader of the year up in San Francisco, and the dinner I went to for that award, I was the only lay leader. The rest of them were all ministers and whatever. So we stayed there, and while I was in Korea, let me back up for just a minute. Working for Bruce Clark and Creighton Abrams, two of the top armor commanders of World War II, they kept saying to me, why don't you switch to armor? I said, I tried to get to armor when I went to Benning, but that's the infantry school, so I ended up in the infantry. I'm sitting at my desk one day, and I get this circular, regular Army captains, armor. So I wrote a letter to the Department of the Army, and I said, I want to switch to armor because Creighton Abrams and Bruce Clark said I ought to be in armor. That's all I said. And the next thing I know, I was a captain regular Army. Up to this point, I was in the Army Reserve and not regular Army. So that's how I stayed in the Army for as long as I did. And from there, after getting into the regular Army, I was assigned to Command and General Staff College. I still was not commissioned in there when I was selected for the Army. The Command and General Staff College was after, while I was there, the regular commission came through. We spent a year there in Kansas, and that was very nice, except for the tornadoes and where we had to go down in the basements. And then from there,
Fort Knox.
yeah. Now I was, yeah, right. Then I was in armor, so I had to go to Fort Knox and get some refresher training. And while at Fort Knox, after I finished the armor refresher training, they assigned me to a 6th Armored Cavalry regiment. And the 6th was going to switch places with the 11th Armored Cavalry, which was in Germany, down in the Regensburg area. And I went over to Regensburg. I was going to take the squadron over with me. The day we got back from our trip to Germany, they were going to take over their equipment. They were going to take over ours when they come back to Knox. I get orders for Asunción, Paraguay, with 13 weeks delay en route to learn Spanish in Washington. I said, boy, what a 180-degree turnout this is. My wife didn't want to go, the kids didn't want to go. I think our daughter wanted to go, or our son wanted to go, but our daughter didn't. But anyway, we all went, and it turned out when it was we were there for a while, the daughter wanted to stay and my son wanted to come over, kind of switched. But my daughter switched into a Spanish-speaking school there. I was the armor advisor to the Republic of Paraguay, which had no tanks, but they wanted to learn defense against armor. So, and I was teaching in their La Escuela Superior de Guerra, the Superior School of War. And I said to them, don't ask me any questions till I finish, and then I'll try to answer. While I'm teaching, I see all these Paraguayan captains and majors wandering around the room. And I went up to them later and I said, how many of you have taken the armored courses at Fort Knox? Every one of them had. And I said, well, why am I teaching this course? You could teach it. Oh, si, senor, we could teach. But you have the Army mission here and you've had that job. So I go back to my boss and I said to him, they don't need me. They can do it themselves. Thinking maybe I'd go home. But he went to the Defense Ministry and they agreed that they didn't eliminate the armor slot, but they wanted it to be a military intelligence slot. Well, that wasn't me. So then while I was, for the rest of my time, which was about another year, they said, well, a year and a half, we actually teach nuclear weapons. Here I go from a country with no tanks to nuclear weapons. So again, they want to learn how do you defend against nuclear weapons. They didn't have any. So I told them just dig deep. That's the best part. And then finally we left there to come home. I was promoted to lieutenant colonel while I was down here. And
What year is this? Or what period?
this period was 1959 and 1961. We met some friends there that worked for AID, that was Administration for Development in these countries, another Jewish couple. I was able, through Panama, which was the headquarters for everybody, to get Passover supplies sent on to us, so they appreciated that. And in Asuncion, there are 3,500 Jewish families. Now, where'd they come from? Paraguay was the only country to open its doors to refugees from Germany before Hitler really got going on his concentration camps. The only stipulation they made to this large group of Jewish people that had come in, if you have doctors, lawyers, dentists, any professional people, you must practice out in the Chaco. Now the Chaco, when you look at it, is a green nothing. It's like a swamp. And they all opted not to go out into the Chaco. So they opened up various businesses in Asuncion. They became the butchers and the grocers and the tailors and the tradesmen of Asuncion. When we were there in 1959-61, which is some years later after they arrived, their children were going to the University of Asuncion and they were becoming the doctors and the dentists and the lawyers. Poetic. So we had, the only incident we had there, our son who loved to ride horses at the time, we were out on a farm with these Paraguayan friends I had, and they were riding, no problem. As they were coming back in, the lady of the house who had been riding a horse went in first and somebody else, and then as they did, it jarred something, the gate started to close. And my son got the whole inside of his thigh ripped open. Fortunately, this guy was a doctor, and he was able to get him into the Asuncion Hospital, which didn't look very sanitary when we looked at it, but he came through all right. That was the only, and then Ruth started working with the doctor's wife, who was working with children that had hair lip, and she helped raise some money for that so that the doctors wouldn't have to work for nothing. So she felt good about that, and finally in 61 we left. I was assigned to Fort Monroe, Kentucky, Virginia, excuse me. I thought I'd be there for 3 years, so I enrolled in the University of George Washington University to get I didn't have a degree at the time. I came in almost from high school. And I started and I finished my degree with George Washington, and I graduated before I was sent back to Germany again. So I think they gave me 2 years credit for taking the GED test and whatever else, so I only had to take 2 years worth of credits. And I got my degree here in Washington. President Eisenhower came down and did the honors with presenting the degrees, which I thought was nice. And from there, I started at Fort Monroe, but then I was switched up to Fort Belvoir to something called the Combat Developments Command. And I didn't want to go, and when I reported in, my boss said, I hear you didn't want to come. You should get to work. So worked there, and then I got orders for Germany again in 1962, and this time to be a battalion commander in the famous 4th Armored Division, the one that General Clark and Creighton Abrams had commanded. And when we got our orders, it was to a little town called Illesheim. So we called the German embassy and said, "Where is Illesheim?" They didn't know. Why didn't they know? Because during World War II, the Germans, as smart as they are, they put a landing strip in, painted it blue, and then covered it with water. So the Allies thought it was the Americans thought it was a little canal. So they never bombed Illesheim. And that's where Hitler used to land his plane when he was ranting and raving in Nuremberg. We were not too far from Nuremberg. Our son graduated from high school while we were there. I was promoted to colonel while I was there, out of the job. I thought I'd be able to stay because they were moving a brigade in, but I wasn't able. And they made me chief of special services for all of Europe. That means you're on all the service clubs, all the community centers, all the bowling alleys, all the golf courses, all of that nice thing that special services do to make the troops happy. The day I reported in for that job, I get an envelope marked U.S. Army War College, Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. I've been selected for the Army War College, which was quite an honor, and report in June or July of 1966. So for 6 months, I had a ball. I did everything I could possibly do. I even turned down what they called year-end funds, which the Army is famous for doing. They allocate all these funds so that they get spent before the fiscal year is over. And let me back up just a minute. I had gone around to all the service clubs that we had, and every storeroom I went into had boxes up to the ceiling of paper cups. And I asked my staff to submit what items they would use, wanted real bad for this $1 million. And the first thing I see is $30,000 worth of paper cups. I called them, I said, "Why do you need more? Why are you so hung up on paper cups?" "Well, we ran out once." I said, "Okay." So I went to my boss and I said, "I'm going to turn back this $1 million. We don't need it there, not in special services. If you've got some other element of the command there that you want to give it to, special services doesn't need it." So I said, "I'll back you up on that." So I notified Heidelberg, which is my next higher headquarters for special services. And they said, "You can't do that. You've got to take it." I said, "General said we don't got to take it." And just about a week later, the word came down that President Johnson said that all end-of-the-year funds go to Vietnam. This was 66, remember. So I left them in late May of 66. I reported in the Carlisle Barracks for the second time, this time to go to the most prestigious school that the Army runs, and had a very pleasant year there. Then they told me I was not going to be assigned to Washington. I had never been assigned to the Pentagon for anything, and when I get my orders, it's for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I went to the people at Carlisle. I said, "I thought I wasn't going to be assigned in Washington." I said, "No." I said, "Did they move the Joint Chiefs of Staff out of Washington?" And they said, "No." I said, "You told me I wasn't going to Washington." Well, anyway, I went, and it turned out to be a really good assignment. But not for the Army, but for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What did I do there? I made one trip to Israel. I was chief of the Joint War Games Division of the Joint Chiefs. They were wargaming the plans of all the major commands of the Army. And Strike Command down in Tampa, Florida, had a mission to aid Israel by sending over an 18th Airborne Corps and all the supplies it could. Because I went to my boss and I said, "We've been wargaming Southeast Asia for years now. Why don't we try the Middle East?" He said, "Go ahead." I had a friend in the Israeli Ministry of Defense, went over, took another colonel over with me, and Air Force colonel, sent him to Lebanon and Jordan, and then back across to Israel. And the Israelis showed me stuff I don't think the attaché people had seen, even though I was sure to have an attaché person with me the whole time I was there. And we came back and wargamed the Strike Command's plans for Israel. The main thing I learned in Israel, that one Israeli could handle 8 Arabs. I thought that was a little high. I learned that they didn't want any 18th Airborne Corps. All they wanted was equipment as fast as we could possibly get it over there, because they said, if you send an Airborne Corps over there, who's going to command who? That was their question. So I went back and we ran the war game with a ratio of 1-8, wouldn't work. Went 1-7, 1-6, 1-5. We got down to 1-3, and the computer cranked on and said, now we can do it. We postulated that the Egyptians would cross the canal, we said on a Shabbat, on a Sabbath, not, that's all we said, on a Sabbath. The Egyptians came across, they got to this kilometer, and they stopped. And this is all in a war game, this is not actual now. We sent our recommendation in, don't commit the 18th Airborne Corps, send supplies over as fast as you can after we finished it. This was now in 69. 73 is when the war hit, but it was on Yom Kippur, not on the Sabbath. And they got to the exact kilometer that we said they would get to. I was scared. I was back up at Carlisle by this time. But anyway, when I left there, I went to Vietnam, and that's where I spent the next year in 69 to 70. My first assignment there was commanding Ben Hoa in Vietnam. I was a full colonel at the time. I was given command of the Ben Hoa Tactical Area Command. Our job was to protect the Long Binh Supply Depot, which was the main supply depot in Vietnam, from any attack and also from any rockets that were being fired against the Army base, the supply base. We weren't having much luck at that until I learned that the field forces, which was across the street, had a long-range reconnaissance patrol company assigned to them. The company was from Indiana, and I wondered at the time if Quayle was in that company, but it turned out that he wasn't. So he gave me the long-range reconnaissance patrol company for 3 weeks. We started going out on the trail every night, further and further out. Each night we were out there, we did kill some people. We would take their papers and look them over. And it wasn't until one night that we killed this one guy. When we took his papers, the Vietnamese translators I had with me looked at it and said, boy, this man was a champion rocketeer for almost the whole Viet Cong, North Vietnam force. And from that night on, not another rocket fell on Long Binh. So I went over to the field force commander, and he said, your mission is finished here. I thought he'd move me across the street to his headquarters, but he said, no, you're going up to Da Nang to be the I Corps Deputy Senior Advisor to General Muller, who's the commander up there. In I Corps, my main mission was to go out and visit all the advisory groups that are scattered throughout the territory there, and there are a lot of them, and see if they had facilities that would be good for the long run, if they had to stay there for a long run. And in most cases they were not. We had plans to build them permanent places for them to stay, so they'd at least be able to wash up at night and clean up at night after being in the field. And while I was in I Corps, I discovered this group of orphanages that were over there, and I started visiting them, started bringing them supplies, school, medical, clothing, whatever they needed. And that was gratifying. In fact, Reader's Digest came over, and I was interviewed by them, and there was a story in there about the colonel who takes care of orphanages in Vietnam. That was way back then. So then in 1970, I finished my assignment. That was my one-year assignment in Vietnam. I was sent back to the States, and lo and behold, I was sent back to the U.S. Army War College to be on the staff and faculty. And that was a 4-year assignment. I almost stayed there for another 4 years because I had really learned the ropes there, and the commandant liked me. And he said, I'm going to give you the Department of Strategy, which was a major appointment there. And just about the time he said that, I think it was the next day, I get a call from the Department of the Army. Because I had been in Paraguay, they were sending me down to be the commander of the School of the Americas in Panama. A very it's a famous school, but infamous in the fact that so many of their graduates turned out to be the dictators of South America. So the commandant called me in. He said, "That's a great assignment." I said, "Okay." So I'm making all the preparations to go over there, to go to Panama. And I get word that I'm not going to Panama. Why? Because I was senior in rank. That whoever was in Panama was going to be my rating officer. I said, "That can't be." I said, "I just got aced out of the Department of Strategy in Carlisle at the War College, and you're telling me I can't go?" Well, I argued, and nothing happened. So I had about 5 more months to go at Carlisle. And during those 5 months, I was sent down to Washington to run a promotion board for regular Army majors, Medical Corps. While I was there, the former deputy commandant of the War College, General Gray, I just ran into in a hall. I said, "Where are you now?" He said, "I'm down at Aberdeen Proving Ground with the Army Test and Evaluation Command." I said, "You got any spaces down there?" He said, "Oh, sure." So I ended up at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Did I say that before? Did I say Carlisle again? He had left Carlisle and he was now down at Aberdeen. So I checked into Aberdeen Proving Ground, thinking I was going to work for this big test and evaluation command. They said, "You're going to be the post commander here." I said, "Gee, okay." Well, that turned out the best 4 years of my life. It was fantastic. I knew it was my last 4 years in the Army. I knew I could try anything I wanted to try. And I was innovating all over the place. First thing I did was open up the post. This used to be a very closed post because of the testing that was going on there. And I called the testers and I said, "What are you testing that's so secret that the public can't see it?" "Well, occasionally, we're some special armor or special this." Okay, so they can't watch during that time. But all the other time, what's to stop them from watching? What harm will it do? No harm. So we opened up the post. Then I went to the mayors all around Harford County, Maryland. I said, "I want to start a civil military advisory council. We meet in the county 1 month, the next month we meet at the officers club at Aberdeen. And I'll have my staff there and we'll go into your place. You send in your mayors, your deputy mayors, deputy county executive, the county executive, whatever." But anyway, it worked out beautifully. One of my soldiers would go downtown, get in a little trouble, they just send them back to me, and I'd give them a slap on the wrist if they deserved it, and we kept us out of the delinquency report thing. And I kept doing this. I was telling them on the ride when we were riding around. I was there in 70 to 74. From 74 to 78. When I got there, it was just at the time that the gas lines were still long at the gas pumps because of the Yom Kippur War in Israel. And I rode around the post and often checking on different things. And what started to gripe me was how long we had to wait for a red light to change. So I called my engineers in, I called my military police in, and I said, "Survey this whole post and come back and tell me where it's dangerous to make a right turn on red." Now this is long before the time of right turn on red. So they did, and they came back and they said there's 4 intersections on the post that we considered dangerous. But I said, "Okay, well, let me go see them." And of the 4, I thought 2 were dangerous and 2 were not. So we opened up the whole post to right turn on red. The main objection was coming, they'll go off the post and think they can turn right all over the place. I said, "No, they won't. They know you can only do it at Aberdeen Proving Ground." So we started, and it was working fine. Nobody got hurt. There was a lot of time and gasoline saved. And I was sitting at my desk one day, and I knock on the door, and it's one of the assemblymen from down in Annapolis, and he wanted to see me. And I said, "Come on in." He said, "I want to thank you, Al." I said, "What did I do?" He said, "You started right turn on red here." He said, "I've had it bottled up in committee for almost a year now, and I couldn't get it out. And this time I'm back and told him Ungerleider's right turning all over the place on Aberdeen Proving Ground, and I got it out of committee, and I got it passed, and Maryland then became the 2nd state in the Union to have right on red." So I felt really good about that. Then the other thing I innovated, this woman came in one day and she said, I'm going to quit. I said, what happened? She said, I can't work where I'm working. The smoking is terrible. And I can't get them to stop smoking, or I can't get them to leave the room and smoke. She said, I'm getting sick. So I said, well, let me see what I can do. I said, I didn't know whether I had any right to interfere with somebody smoking at that time. My good secretary, one Monday morning when I come in, I look at my desk, and the state of New Jersey had a case where the Bell Telephone Company had the same situation, smoke-filled room. Fired the lady that came to complain. She went up through the court system in New Jersey, and the state Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey ruled that she had to be reinstated with back pay, and they had to set up smoke-free areas within their plan. We had a lot of unions, trade unions, on the post at Aberdeen. They couldn't strike, but they could complain about everything else. So I called them in and I said to them, this is what I want to do. And they clapped. They were all looking for a way to solve this problem. So I set it up in a directive that I put out from the headquarters, which included all the units on the post, including the headquarters that I was working for. And we started it. My engineers who know how to do things made a cigarette a block long, gave me an axe, and they took a picture of me chopping the cigarette in half. And it was through all the Army Material Command's newspapers throughout the land. I got calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. So these are the types of things I was doing in Aberdeen, knowing I was going to be leaving the Army soon. And it worked well. And the lesson I learned is that anybody can innovate if they really are brave enough to do it. And some of these things, what happened once with the smoking thing, I used to have to go to a staff meeting up at this Test and Evaluation Command headquarters, and the general will come in a little late, and he takes out his pipe, and he's putting his tobacco in, he's about to light it, and his chief of staff leans over and said something to him. I didn't hear him, put it down. And that staff meeting was over in 1 hour. It used to take 3 hours. They all wanted to go out and smoke. So he came to me later, he said, Al, you did a good thing. And from that time on, the staff meeting just went faster than they ever do. Guys didn't want to sit there without smoking for any length of time. So finally I retired, and just a quick, for when I finally retired from the Army after 36 years, a friend of mine who had been working at Aberdeen had moved to Northern Virginia, and he belonged to a Jewish congregation called Olam Tikva in Fairfax County. And he writes to me and says they're looking for an executive director. And I said, well, I'll learn what the job's supposed to be. But I remembered in the Army, so many chaplains used to come up to me and say, why don't you work in synagogues when you leave the military? I said, what, as a rabbi? And they said, no, there's lots of jobs in synagogues. So this friend called me and wanted to know would I take this job. So I went down and I was interviewed, and one of the guys who had a little military background, he said, how are you going to gear yourself down from commanding thousands of people and to a little congregation like we have of 375 people? I said, I'll try. So in the meantime, they had all these training centers set up that Carter set up, trying to remember the name of them, but it was to train the kids from off the street into some skill that they'd learn and get them out of the crime area and that type of thing. And they were opening one of these centers not too far from where we were. And I called to see if I would be eligible for a job like that. That would be ideal, what I would like to do. And I went to Rochester, New York. Kodak was running these places all over the country, and they said, yep, we got just a place for you, Buffalo, New York. I said, Buffalo, New York? I want to stay in Aberdeen area. And they said, no, Buffalo, New York. I went up, and I'm thinking of all the snow drifts in the winter. So I came back, and when the synagogue called again and said, come down and work for us, that's where I worked. 7 years I gave the synagogue, and that was more than enough. The second one I worked in was a Reformed synagogue in Alexandria, and when I left there, one of the members of the congregation had a book publishing company, Military Almanacs, he called it. And I met him one night at a meeting, and he says, how about coming down and just review one of our almanacs. I said, which one you talking about? He said, well, we have a Uniformed Services Almanac, which is for active duty military. We have a retired military for all the retired folks, all services. We have a Reserve Forces Almanac, and we have a National Guard Almanac, and we have a Federal Personnel Guide. Cover the whole spectrum. So I said, what do you want me to do? He said, I just want you to come down and look at this one book and make sure from your military eye for the active duty that it looks okay. I reported in. I hadn't been sitting at my desk for 15 minutes when he gets a call from the National Cardiology Center right next door that his editor, his chief editor, had had a terrible heart attack coming to work, and he pulled in air and he saved his life. So he came in and said to me, would you like to stay on? He said, I need some insurance. So I stayed on. I worked there almost 10 years, and I enjoyed it. Why? I was working for one boss, not a whole congregation, and that was the main attraction of that job, plus nice people. I mean, really great. The old man who had hired me, he had a terrible bout of cancer. They took out half of his upper torso, but he's okay now. He came through it all right, but he sold the company. He sold it to this guy who had the heart attack, which was still fine, no problem yet. He brought in his daughter to be the secretary and receptionist. And that particular year, I just felt like taking some time off. I said, after we get all the books out and they're being published, I might taking about a 3 or 4 month vacation. I want to travel Europe and do this, give my wife a break and get away from things. He said, okay. So then the next year, he had already brought in his son-in-law. So when I came back and I started to work, he said, how about taking another 4 to 6 months off again this year? Because I did it without pay. And I said, no, I did it once. I'm not prepared to do it. So he wouldn't agree to that, so I left. And that was my last employment for pay. Then I get involved in the 29th Division Association, and I'm busier with that than with anything. And while I'm doing that, I don't know if you were aware that in 1993 and 94, there was a group going around this country selling $40 certificates to veterans who wanted to get their name on a wall in France, in the city of Caen, C-A-E-N. And they collected from 66,000 veterans, $2.6 million, never built a wall, and the money evaporated. Pierre Salinger, who some of you may have heard of, he used to be the press secretary for John Kennedy when he was president. He felt very badly because he was the guy going around collecting these $40, but he didn't know what was happening to the money. He called me into his office. He said, would you be willing to serve on a committee of veterans that will try and get that wall built? I said, I think so. That sounds interesting. So about 16 of us signed up for this thing. A couple of 4-star generals, General Vesey, who had just retired as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and at that time we were called a Blue Ribbon Committee. He had another 4-star General Starry on it, who was the training commander. He had a 2-star Medal of Honor winner from Vietnam, and then I wasn't next in rank, but I was next active duty during World War II guy. And we had a lawyer in Texas who said that he would incorporate us. He said that he'd get us tax-free status, he'd get us Constitution and the bylaws and all that goes with it. I said, fine, and we named this the United States World War II Wall of Liberty Foundation. And we started. Little did I know about red tape in Washington. I didn't know I needed to approve. I knew we had to accomplish 4 things. We had to get the names of these 66,000. We had to get land in France, and then raise the money to do it. A 4th mission got piled on top of us, so we had to get the approval of the United States Fine Arts Commission. Now I'm thinking, what does the Fine Arts Commission have to do with a monument in France? And then from there, with their approval, you had to get the approval of the American Battle Monuments Commission, also in Washington. Fine. Got both, well, let me back up a minute. Looking for the land, I knew some of the mayors in Normandy. I had been back and forth a few times. And I had asked them to look in their own backyard that they have an acre or two of land someplace that could be made into a public memorial. So while they were looking, Ruth and I decided we were going to take a tour of Greece and Turkey. And I get a call from a Frenchman who was also on this foundation board. Come to Utah Beach on your way to Greece and Turkey. I said, how do I do that? He said, we'll have a car, meet the both of you at the airport in Paris. We'll drive you to Utah Beach. You'll meet somebody that you want to meet, and then you can continue your tour. What he didn't tell me was that Steven Spielberg was going to have the opening of Private Ryan in France, in Deauville, at about the same time. So I get down, I meet this billionaire Frenchman who owns all the shopping centers in France and half the rest of the continent. He says, I'm prepared to donate to your cause 10 hectares of land. That's 23 acres for you non-farmers. And we didn't need that much, we needed about an acre. And I said, well, let me go back and when I finish my vacation, and I'll see what the board of directors, whether they agree with this. Then he took us a delicious lunch there on the beaches of Normandy, and then we followed him. We had a chauffeur driving us to his house, and he has a big castle there, and just to freshen up. And then he was going to lead us into Deauville to see Private Ryan. I had already seen it once. I knew all this was coming about Deauville, so I had the national commander, the 29th, write to the mayor of Deauville to get me tickets to get in, and 2, write to Steven Spielberg to see if I could get an interview with him, because hopefully I could hit him up for $2 million for this memorial over there. So this all worked out, except I didn't think I was going to meet Spielberg. What happened was I was wearing what I have on now, watching the movie. When I come out, a whole press corps gets around me. What did I think of the movie? And they're going on, and time is passing, and I'm wondering, am I going to see Spielberg or not? When they finished with me, Ruth and I started to walk out to find our chauffeur to go back to Paris to continue on to Greece and Turkey. Just about at the door, when this woman, lady, all out of breath, comes chugging up, sir, Mr. General Ungerleider, can you follow me? I said, what for? She said, Mr. Spielberg wants to see you. I said, thank God. So we went in, and for 20 minutes we had his attention. I brought him, yesterday I was wearing the 29th Division bolo tie. It's got the insignia and so on. And I brought a present for him. And I had a copy of our 29er magazine. I don't know if I brought them in. Yeah, I think they're. And I said, in the next issue, you're going to find the comments of every 29er who landed on the beach of Normandy telling you what they thought of your movie. He said, oh, that'll be great. He said, can I have that one? I should show him one. There's nothing about that. So I gave him that one. I thought I had him really set up after 20 minutes to get a nice big donation from him for this our project. Turned out that didn't happen. Still hasn't happened. So then we continued on, and that's what I've been doing. I've been either the editor of our 29er magazine, all this for the last 12 years. I brought it from a little newsletter to a magazine-style publication, and this Wall of Liberty, and those are the two things that keep me busiest. Hopefully, we need to collect $10 million. We need to raise $10 million to take care of those 66,000 that kicked in the $40. It's not been easy. We got all the approvals we needed, but it's not been easy. Until just the last meeting we had, I have a judge on my board of directors who's the head of the Superior Court system for the whole state of Pennsylvania. He came to the last meeting we had, and he says, hold tight. I think I've got somebody that will pick up the tab for this first $10 million. So that's 6 weeks ago, and he hasn't picked up the tab yet, but they're still working on it. And hopefully that'll happen. Because I think what he wants to do, rather than give us $10 million outright, is to give us a line of credit for $10 million, and we just send all the bills to him, which would save me one hell of a big headache. So we're working on that, but I've been back and forth to Normandy for that. I've been back and forth in connection with the various D-Day plus 50, plus 55, and then one after that, and one after that, and then I went over with the new commanding general of the 29th Division as a veteran to go with his troops while they were showing all the terrain over there. So I'm busy with those two items, and still trying to participate. We were in Bedford for the opening of the National Memorial Day. We'll be back there again for the final dedication, and then down here for the D-Day. So those are the things I do, and trying to stay as Jewish as I can while we're doing it. It's not rubbing off on our kids too well, but they go when they can. Our daughter has become very kosher in our house, so that surprises. And we enjoy our grandchildren whenever we can get to see them. We're going up, we get back home Wednesday. We take off Thursday for Boston again to see our oldest grandson's graduation from high school, preparing to go on to Duke University against the wishes of his father. He wants to go to the University of Massachusetts, not the thing. So, and I'm in the synagogue every Friday night and Saturday and all the holidays, and my wife works very much with the sisterhoods there, and we're very active in that. I was president of the Retired Officers Association of Northern Virginia for 2 years. I am a Mason, and I go to as many Masonic meetings as I can. I'm a Master Mason, Scottish Rite Mason, and Shriner. And they do nothing but good. And I belong to American Legion. I meet with them once a month. What else do I go to that I left off?
I think that's enough.
That's enough. So my wife's very understanding. She, at least the only good that comes with her, she doesn't have to cook dinner for me when I go out to these dinners. And she can come too, but she chooses not to. So I hope I've covered my life in the military on, and hopefully I can keep going. I am not getting any younger. There's a movie called Breakthrough by the History Channel, and they play it every year around D-Day. I don't know if they've played it this year or not. What happened with Breakthrough, I was called to New York to comment on the movie, what I thought of the movie. I and another general also from Chrisville, not also, but he's from Chrisville, Maryland. And the two of us put on a real dog and pony show telling him what we thought of the movie, and Sander Van Oker was interviewing us, and his last question was, when you landed on the beaches of Normandy, did any of you kiss any of the French girls? And the other general kind of blushed for me. And I said, I did. He said, that's a good way to end the interview. So what can I say to end this interview? Does that take care of what you wanted?
We're going on with you, so we'll keep asking questions.
Okay. Feel free, and if you have any questions, I gave you
Yes,
my
sir.
card, and if anything else comes up after this, call me. I'll be glad to.
I'll get a couple if you wouldn't mind. Now.
Go ahead, sure.
Well, just going back to World War II, did you find your training going from the NCO Academy, the OCS, how did you find that application to real combat?
Well, the main thing I learned in Benning was say, follow me.
Okay.
And that's the way I led my troops into combat, and I recommend it. It's for the leader to be up front. We lost a lot of young second lieutenants and first lieutenants in World War II because of Benning. But I got hit once and twice, but I lasted.
And you arrived in Britain in January of 1944,
Yeah.
and started with the L Company at that time.
That's right.
By that time, you had about 6 months almost. You must have had a pretty good unit cohesion by that time.
Oh, I had that platoon really honed to a fine tune, and it was, they're great people. Eastern Shore or not, and I see a lot of them at these various reunions of the 29th Division Association. I mentioned getting with them and becoming their editor of their magazine and going up through ranks to be the national commander. And I still go to as many reunions, and we're the ones that are really the people behind this National D-Day Memorial in Bedford. Our division association, not as an association, but all the individuals have contributed already over $250,000, and will continue to do so. And when we find things we think will fit in the museum, we send them to them. And we're going to be in force. You're going to see a lot of 29ers with this hat on tomorrow in the parade. And in Bedford, the problem was that, there were 5 divisions involved in D-Day. 2 airborne, 3 ground, 4th, 29th, and 1st. And they're all fighting for some part of that National D-Day Memorial. And I don't blame them. They were there. Here, we're talking mostly about boats that took us in. It's going to be somewhat different. There won't be as much jockeying for a position that, say, my division was better than yours. But I'm glad to see this. This honoring of Andrew Jackson Higgins is long, long overdue. I was telling them, the Discovery Channel called me, it must be 8-10 months ago. They wanted me to come to Cincinnati, Ohio, to talk about vehicles that were used in World War II. So I went, and when I got there, they said, well, we only want you to talk about the assault landing craft that took you in. I said, okay. So that was one part of the thing. Then they had another group talking, not in Cincinnati, I don't know where they were, about the 2.5-ton truck. Another group that talking about the Jeep. Another group that's talking about the ducks that try to get in and out of the water and act like vehicles when they got on land. Not very successful, I mean. But the only ones Higgins was involved in was the landing craft, not just at Omaha and Utah beaches, but all over the Pacific. Almost every landing there was in some boat that Higgins' company had made. And I said that to this Discovery Channel people, we have not honored Andrew Jackson Higgins enough. He deserves the highest award that this country can bestow on him, because even Eisenhower has said, without him we would not have won the war. And I said that 8-10 months ago. Now they're saying it frequently here. And it's true. The man was a genius and deserves everything the United States. I don't know what the highest civilian award. I think it's a Congressional Medal of Honor for civilians. And if he hadn't got that yet, he should get it.
I think there's a movement afoot to award Mr. Higgins, which I would agree with you.
Yeah. Well, it'll bring more fame to New Orleans.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Yeah.
How'd you find all your equipment from uniform? I heard so many comments about the uniform. Of course, being impregnated against possible gas attack. That it was hot. It was smelly. Very uncomfortable. You guys could not get out of them soon enough.
All those words you just used, hot, smelly, and uncomfortable, were exactly right. They were designed in case of a gas attack when we went in on the beaches. We discarded them as fast as we could as soon as we got in, and we saw that there was no gas attack.
Well, what did you find useful to carry, and what did you discard as far as equipment goes?
Well, when I landed, I had a musette pack on my back. I had a carbine on my shoulder. I had a belt with a canteen, first aid pack, and the usual stuff. So I was relatively light. Some of the men who went in had their duffel bags over their shoulders and everything else, and that's no way to hit a beach. And they dropped them on the beach, and hopefully they got married up with them later on. But I, for one, did not feel, other than the smelly uniform, didn't feel any discomfort as far as in landing, as far as what I was wearing and what I was carrying.
So you all came in on the LCI, so you got to drop the ramps down?
On the sides, yeah.
Okay.
And as I said, this guy said, they're going to get you in dry or not take you in, and 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on land, and you couldn't ask for anything more.
You said you mentioned getting wounded and being evacuated back to England. Now, did you miss, was the Hill 108, that was such a tremendous fight for the 29th? Well, it was middle of June, I believe.
Yeah. That was near St. Lo.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I missed that one. But I did not miss Hill 203 down at Beard.
Okay.
The 116th took that, but we protected their flank as they were doing that. Funny thing about that particular hill, now you're talking about hill, let me just add a little thing. I get a call from Richmond a couple of years ago and said that the 1st Battalion of the 116th took Hill 203, as you know, because there's a big 29th Division monument up there. And they were awarded the French Croix de Guerre. They received a certificate that says they earned it, but they never got the medal. I said, why are you calling me? They said, you can do anything. I said, oh, come on. Well, it just happened. The next day, I get a letter from the American Croix de Guerre Association in New York City, headed up by a brigadier general. So I called them and I introduced myself. I said, I want to join your group, and I did. It cost $5. And I said, can you help with this problem? He said, well, let me see what I can do. Within 3 weeks, I had the medal, not only for that battalion that took the hill, but I had the medal for the whole 116th that hadn't gotten their medal, but they never said anything about it. So I called down to Stanton, Virginia, which is the home of the 116th, and I said, I've got these 2 medals. How do you want to? At that time, I was national commander of the 29th and of the association, and I told him about the 2 medals. Where do you want me to present them? I said, as national commander, it'd be an honor for me to do so. He said, let me check on it. I'll call you back. 3 weeks go by. Finally, I suggested that either we do it when they go on active duty training in the summer for their 2 weeks, or the 116th has what they call an annual muster. They get in as many people in the 116th as they can. I said either place would be ideal. So finally, they said, we've decided to do it at the muster, and we'll send you some details about it. The first thing I get was a thing that says send them $20 and I can come to the muster. I said, no. So I called some of my Roanoke friends down there, and I told them about it. They said, just you come down, don't worry about $20, we'll get you in. But I presented the battalion with its medal, and I presented the regiment with its medal. So I only raise this point why people think I can get anything done, but I at least try if somebody asks. With this Wall of Liberty, I get letters by the hundreds asking what happened to their $40. Is there any progress being made to rectify this? And I have a form letter. All I have to do is on my computer is change the address and send out the same letter. And it closes, if you know any millionaires, refer them to me. And I've had some help from some of them on that. So I do what I can. I do what I can Masonically. That takes a lot of my time. Our crippled children's hospitals need a lot of money. The Shriners have 18 crippled children's hospitals throughout the country. Nobody pays for anything. They have 4 burn centers. Same thing. And they do nothing but good. And then the Scottish Rite part of which was the next level down, they decided they would get into the business of children who have trouble speaking, language disoriented children. And they built these language disorder training centers all over the country, and they come out with their own credit card to help finance this. They get a 5% out of each card sale or something. But those have blossomed all over the country. The one in Washington, Bess Truman came over and cut the ribbon for that because she had, both of her sons were dyslexic, both of them. One's a governor now, one's running for president. So they learn how to talk and see that the right words follow in order. Sometimes you wonder about Bush, but he tries hard. So that's the other good thing they're doing, and our local Masonic groups go out locally and see what they can do to help.
A couple more questions, if you don't mind, about World War II.
Go ahead.
How did you find German prisoners of war, the attitude? I've heard anything from arrogant to scared to happy to being relieved of the...
German prisoner of wars fit all those descriptions, but depended on the individual. Some were scared, some of them were not, some of them were arrogant. We got them back to the rear as fast as we could get them. We didn't want to bother them. We had military police along the way that could herd them back. A lot of them ended up in the States with plush assignments, better treatment than our black soldiers were getting at the time. That's the shame of it all. That's the shame of it all.
Now, with further duty to the 29th, did you have further contact with displaced persons?
In that year that I was
Yes,
there,
Just
that half year when I was on that Graves Restoration, we ran into some DP camps, and I went in to see what they were. I didn't know what they were at the time, and they told me, and whatever food there we could drop out, or we'd send them back and get some more. Then when I went back in 47, they were still in existence, all these displaced persons camps. We were in Frankfurt for the first 18 months before I joined the 1st Division. The head of the Jewish Welfare Board, or the representative of the Jewish Welfare Board in Frankfurt, was a fellow named Bert Levine from Paterson, New Jersey, down in your area. and he used to go out to the DP camps. So I learned about it, and I said, Bert, would you mind if I go out with you? I have access to the PXs and whatever, maybe I can help. So I started going out with him, and all the camps around Frankfurt I got to know pretty well, some of the people. Some of them are working in a Holocaust museum now. That's another thing I left out. I worked there as a volunteer 1 day a week in Washington, every Tuesday, from 10 in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And that brings it back every time, And I've been looking for people from Nordhausen. I looked for them in Paraguay with all those people down there. I looked for them in different places, and it wasn't until I started working in the Holocaust Museum I ran into a couple that were in Nordhausen. Now remember, there were 23 of these camps around there. They probably didn't see me, and I didn't see them, but they gave me a book that they had written about Nordhausen and the Allied liberation teams that came in. And that's the first time in all these years, and the only two. But the museum just finished one of the special exhibits on displaced persons. And now they just opened one called Flight and Rescue. They just opened it a couple of weeks ago, and I had my first tour being oriented on what we were seeing last week. And it's about the Jews of Lithuania and Eastern European countries who try to get out in some way. And some of them got as far as China. They ended up in Shanghai, and some of them got to Japan, Kobe. And these were stories I hadn't heard before, and so it's a really worthwhile exhibit. It's one of the better ones that they put up of late. So I feel it's my duty to be there every Tuesday. There are some Tuesday mornings I just don't feel like getting up and riding that metro in the town, but I just make myself. I'm also on their Speakers Bureau. And I've been as far as Naperville, Illinois, the high school out there. I've been down to Clemson University, to the college there, telling my story of how D-Day is connected with Nordhausen. I've been to Syracuse, New York. I've been just almost up and down the East Coast, and I'm available anytime. And anytime they ask for a liberator, I'm the only liberator, I think, in the museum. The rest are all survivors. So I go out with a survivor, and I let them talk first, and that cuts my talk down to 15 minutes. They have all bottled this stuff up so long as a survivor. I don't know if it's because they felt guilty for surviving or what, that once they start talking, they can't stop. So, but it's been nice working with them. I don't mind that. As I say, it cuts down. I've got a 15-minute speech, a 30-minute speech, and I'm prepared to go each way. So we were just, the fellow that really built, and this is getting away from me, that really built the Holocaust Museum was a fellow by the name Miles Lehrman. Some of you have heard the name, some of you know him. They had a big tribute to him Wednesday or Thursday night this past week. And a lot of important people there. He almost single-handedly brought that museum into fruition. There was a fellow by the name Meyerhoff was also big, and a few others, but Miles was the one with the idea and the one that made it go.
Ruth told me that when you speak to crowds regarding the liberation, that you start with D-Day. Why do you explain that?
Because the liberation would not have happened without D-Day. That's my main. I said I try to tie in the Normandy landings with whatever liberation took place.
So in many ways, it was definitely the
Yeah,
Great Crusade in many ways.
Yeah, because without the first, the second could not have happened. It's from that standpoint. That's my read on it, and I think it's an effective way to do it. Anyway, I still have a nightmare occasionally about, I shouldn't keep saying Nordhausen. Those 23 camps around Nordhausen were called Dora-Mittelbau, Mittelbau, Dora-Mittelbau. And that was what the name for these 23 camps. But Nordhausen, nobody ever says they liberated Dora-Mittelbau, because the 104th Division went through there before I got there, and the 3rd Armored Division, General Rose's division, had gone through there. But they didn't hit all these 23 camps. They just went barreling through. And I don't think they stopped to help any of these people. I don't know. But so that's what later on, I knew they had gone through, and I was surprised when we started getting firing at us. We were one of 2 liberations that took place that had to fight their way in. The other one was Dachau. All the other ones, they just walked in. The Germans had taken off. There was no opposition, and they just moved on in.
How were the guards? Were they?
They were pretty arrogant. They were SS troops. My people wanted to kill them. I felt like killing them. But I thought we better abide by the Geneva Convention. And we didn't kill them. The only ones we killed were the guy in the oven and the guys in the turret. And they got surprised, getting hit by a tank gun that demolished their place of hiding.
That's good.
Good.
Great.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you for this opportunity. I
Thank
know
you very much.
Yeah.
my son has been after me to do this for a long time, my youngest son. My oldest son could do it, but he never has time. He's got all the
Right.
cameras and everything else.
Yeah, me too.